Taylor has been called the voice of the grunts. He's a former soldier who covers war from the point of view of the troops, and that's made him a thorn in the side of the military's top brass for decades. Taylor grew up loving the military, spent 4 years as a private before launching a magazine called Esprit. Now that was back in 1989. At first it was just something for soldiers to read on Canadian military planes. It was funded by the Defense Department, and Taylor figured it was a way for him to travel and stay close to the action. He reported from wherever Canadians were stationed, and soldiers started telling him stories that didn't really match the official military lines. Taylor told those stories, and he felt the heat. Within a couple of years, Esprit split from the Defense Department and ended up on newsstands as an independent with a new motto: plain talk and bad manners. Through the 90s, Taylor exposed corruption and hazing in the military and came to prominence with tough, uncompromising coverage of the Somalia scandal.
The lack of leadership and logistic support which these troops received, it wasn't at the private level that the problems happened in Somalia.
Since then, Taylor has made 21 trips to Iraq. He's covered conflicts around the world, including the Balkans and Afghanistan.
It's been dubbed Mission Impossible by the people that are planning it.
And he's written 5 bestsellers. In 2004, he made headlines when he was kidnapped by Mujahideen in northern Iraq.
This is right where the actual abduction took place. The Hitachi sign, that's where it is, that's where it took place.
He was tortured for 5 days and narrowly escaped death by beheading.
Originally, they thought I was a spy. I mean, it was at least over the 5-day period 6 times when I was taken to be executed. I mean, I was on the cusp.
He tells the story in his new memoir called Unembedded. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Scott Taylor. Good to see you. Welcome to the show. Good to be here. What happened to the mustache?
I'm glad it's gone. What was I thinking?
Embedded. You know, it was in the last 5 years when people really started to hear that phrase a lot, the idea of an embedded journalist. You've been an embedded journalist and an unembedded journalist. The difference between the two, and I guess there's a need for both?
Well, now, I mean, with the situation in Afghanistan and Iraq, you almost have to be embedded if you're going to be safe. I mean, I found that out the hard way. And in the early days, having been a soldier first and then sort of gone into this reporting, sort of backed into it, I used to do what the other journalists would call a dog and pony show. I would go with the military into the Balkans and Croatia. And everyone else sort of shied away from this idea of being inside the military, getting told what was happening. Now it's become this sort of thing. It's just a cool way to do it, and then everybody thinks it's
well, they shied away with it because they thought they weren't going to be told the truth.
They couldn't get the whole truth.
Yeah,
and they can't. I mean, it's just physically impossible if you're getting one side and you're seeing Afghanistan through the barrel of a Canadian soldier's rifle. I mean, that's all you're seeing. It's an important view.
Sure.
But it doesn't give us the bigger picture.
Well, Esprit changed over the years, and you started to get that point of view, and certainly in your book you talk about that. But why is it important to talk to the Taliban, you know, and to talk to those kinds of people?
Well, this is, I mean, because they're there. I mean, this is the thing. They are Afghanistan. And we hear, I mean, the platitudes from people like Defense Minister Peter MacKay saying, we will not negotiate with them. Well, they have about 35% popular support. That's a majority government in Canada. How do you just ignore that? I mean, you talk about democracy. It's like, okay. And they have people elected on the Taliban ticket that are serving as members of parliament in Kabul. I've interviewed them. They're there. I mean, there's a guy named Mullah Rakati, Reverend Bazooka. I mean, he's an ex-RPG gunner.
Reverend Bazooka is a great name.
I love that name.
It's a great, great name.
You know he's a religious man when he can fire an RPG.
That's right.
And if you don't like him, you know.
How much of it, though, is, and you bring up an interesting point, there also seems to be a lack of understanding as to what the Taliban are, in that these days you always hear the term insurgent, right? And insurgent is like a catch-all phrase to describe everybody that you're fighting against. But in actual fact, insurgent could mean a couple of people who didn't want to see their uncle get blown up, and when their uncle got blown up, they're now fighting for their neighborhood. It becomes, like, it's just more than just the common enemy.
It is so complex. I mean, that's why I think they don't want to go there. I mean, it's easier to label them all Taliban insurgents than it is to say, look, there's drug lords here, there's ex-warlords here, there's people that have got different agendas. I mean, as little as having 4 guys under your command makes you a warlord from your little village, and you can go to the table and you've got your group, and all these guys break apart, they come together. I mean, this is the history of Afghanistan. But to try to tell it to people in a minute and a half news clip and explain who just attacked our soldiers,
sure,
it ain't going to happen. So it's easier just to label them all Taliban, ergo equals bad, equals no negotiation, and on we go.
Yeah, you go after the military, but I mean, there's a difference in going after the military and going after soldiers. You know, in this country, it's really hard to say anything critical about the military because you have the Neanderthal press out there, some of them who just like, don't say anything bad about our soldiers.
Support the troops.
Yeah, support the troops, which just seems like such an asinine comment because sometimes the criticism of the military is in fact supporting the troops. It's protecting the troops.
Well, that line about, I mean, you have to support the mission. or else you're questioning the troops. No, the troops, you can say, okay, I mean, they're not doing anything wrong. Yeah. This is perfectly, logical, but the mission, we as Canadians have to say, is it worth $18 billion, 108 soldiers' lives, 700 wounded? We have to determine if that's, what we want to pay to achieve what, and we question what the results are. But these guys over there, the soldiers, no one's saying that they're doing the job wrong. Or,
of course not.
Even if they don't have equipment and the media's on there, that's great. And they go and get the equipment, they get helicopters, and they get everything. Spend, spend, spend. But ultimately, you can, and not only can you must question the mission. We owe the soldiers that right, that sacrifice is ultimately justified.
We're going to talk about, I want to ask you about how Afghanistan changes now that Obama has placed far more import on that mission for the Americans. And also I want to find out what it's like to be kidnapped and the things that you kind of went through. More with Scott Taylor when we come back. All right, later on the show, the hour goes investigative. What's really going on in the auto industry? And can the big three survive?
I want to buy that truck.
For $67,000.
What choice do you have? You're in a deficit. You guys are getting killed.